Okay, so today's lesson is called Still Life Complex Composition. We are going to watercolor this particular image, okay? Complex in the sense that it has a varied a semblance of objects, right? This complex texture here presented to us by the flowers and these different elements. They're all very different. The skull, and there's a story told, and there's light coming through the object. So there's a lot to consider here, right? So we're going to develop this image as a watercolor, okay, step by step. The first thing we do is we look at this photo reference, right? But ideally, we would like to paint and draw from real life. In other words, have this set up somewhere where we can see the still life and be able to manipulate things, etc. But at this point, we're going to use this photo as if we're looking at a still life in front of us, okay? Okay, so the first thing we do, we want to make sure we have all our materials. We have our paper, we have tape, water, our palette. We're going to use a limited palette of color, blue, red, yellow, and a little Payne's gray if necessary, but probably not. And so let's go ahead now, okay? So the first thing I want to do is let's analyze the photo reference here, right? So as you see, the vase and the flowers, they represent a dominant object, the dominant sort of theme, what holds the theme of the image together, right? And it's a vertical, right? So we're going to tape down our paper vertically, okay? We have nice watercolor paper here. Pull out a single sheet. We're going to tape it down. Okay, nice and square to our drawing board. Okay. We like to do things neatly, as you all know. No? Okay. Very good. And then, and we must have our number 2 pencil, because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw our image, design our image. We're going to employ our master cube. Okay. I'm going to take my number 2 pencil, maybe even sharpen it a little bit. Okay. Very good. Right? And we're going to draw lightly, right? So first thing we do is we want to be conscious of the perimeter of the master cube. Okay. This is a fairly intimate composition, so the back plane of our master cube is going to fall very close to us, like that, right? And so now I'm looking at the fold in the wall to the surface of the table. It's going to fall right about here. So all our objects are going to stand here on that area, on that surface, right? So that helps us visualize the space, right? It's a volume of space, right? And I like to start to identifying the objects that are furthest from us. First is the cloth, which kind of flows this way. You can see the flow of the shadow area. It's kind of going out that way. Okay. Very good. Now we can place that vase, okay, and the flowers, which we identified as like the dominant element in the composition. So it's kind of in the middle of the page, right? But I'm gonna set it off just a little bit to the right to pick up on some of that space, right? So just slightly off center towards the back, right? So I'm going to consider the location of the footprint right there. Now, what we want to make sure we do is that we are able to encompass all of that height, right? And so as we see, the vase is about as high as the flowers themselves, right? So let's check. So let's say if the vase was this high, the flowers would be as high falling into this area, right? Maybe I can move things down a little closer, just a bit. Okay, so let's put the vase in, right? Slightly off center, right? Here's our footprint of the vase. Okay, we want to draw the center axis of the vase. The vase is symmetrical, so right about there. Okay, here's the opening of the vase, right? And I like to, before I identify the volume of the vase, I like to put in a couple tick marks in the transition of the shape, right? So I'm going to go ahead and draw my vase in full volume, nice and light. Okay, right there. There's my vase, nice and light. Okay, perfect, right? And the flowers come out of the vase into this area. I'm going to just graphically, texturally put it in there. I'm more concerned about the feel and the overall shapes of this configuration. Okay, so as you see, I'm identifying some of the shapes, the movement, the directionality of the composition, okay? And there we are. Okay, very quickly, we've drafted in the texture of it, right? Okay, so now let's take a look. Let's put in that wine bottle. It's in the shadow area, but it is there, right? So it's slightly behind the vase, right about there. Most of it's going to be hidden by the skull that's in the foreground, but we're going to put the bottle in there. It's taller than the vase, right? And there it is, right? There's our bottle, excuse me, right? Okay. Okay, nice, elegant bottle. Now let's take a look at the apple here. It's set back a little bit, right back in here. There's the footprint of the apple. The apple's about that tall, right, in relationship to the vase. Right, I'm going around it to be conscious of the full volume there and the shadow area that comes off the apple, right? The shadow area that comes off the vase, okay? And now for the wine glass, right? And so you can see the wine glass is a little bit in front of the apple here. The center of the stem is right about there. The foot of the glass is right about there. Okay, and let's see the height of the glass right about to there. Okay, and we want to draw the center axis of the glass, right? And then there's the flute, which happens like, okay, I'm just putting in those guides, those tick marks. So I'm going around the stem, and it widens out. Right, and there's our glass in full volume. Okay, and we can indicate that shadow area thrown by the wine glass coming out this way. It's right about out there. Okay, now we can locate our skull. Okay, now as you see, the skull overlaps the wine bottle a little bit, so we can maybe even to avoid a little confusion with the line work, we can estimate where it's going to fall. So I'm going to eliminate some of that line work right now to, like I said, avoid the confusion. So the first thing we do is, like with all our objects, to help us place this object, we want to estimate the footprint of where the skull is going to appear. So here I'm looking like that's right about where the front edge of the skull is, right? And it kind of goes back in space and fits right in there, right? Right about there. Okay? And then the height of the skull is about like that, right? The volume of the skull, right about like that, right? Here's the front plate of the skull. That would be this area, right? And then the snout area, right? And you can see the volume of the skull appearing here, right? And so let's, and as we know, the skull has a bilateral symmetry in it, right? So there's a line going down the middle to help us locate the eye sockets, right? So there's one eye socket on this side, right? Another eye socket on this side. Okay, nose bridge, right? The line, the teeth line, right about there. There's a little bit of a cheekbone there, cheekbone here, right? Right, jawbone fitting under. Okay, the teeth, we're going to just roughly put them in there. Right, and there we have the skull. Okay, kind of goes back. It's a little square, and then we have it, right? That jawbone fits underneath the cheekbone there. Right, and there we have it, the skull in full dimension, right? Our shadow area is moving off. It's a little tighter here than normal, but that's okay. Things are moving around. Okay, so, and the shadow area goes off to the right. Okay, so here's we have our composition. I'm happy with it, and you want to make sure your composition is done properly, right? So that you're going to spend a lot of time creating the image, so we want to make sure everything's in good place. Notice the objects are occupying, there's a balance between the space the objects occupy and the surrounding space, right? So you want to give everything, there's a balance, a good balance, right? So, okay, so here we go. So I'm going to put my pencil away. I'm liking what I'm seeing, right? And the one thing that I want to make sure I see is that the light is coming from the left side, right? And look at these interesting shadows that occur back in there, okay? We're going to try to include all that, okay? So here we go. So I have my water, right? The first thing I want to do is to analyze my color strategy, right? And there's definitely a dominant sort of yellow color because of the green background, right? So we're going to work from our warm colors to our cool colors, right? And we're working from light to dark. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to splash in, I'm going to allocate the yellow color wherever I see, and that's predominantly in this area. The skull has a little bit of a redder hue to it, okay? So we're going to consider all that, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we have we're going to have our nebulizer, our water sprayer, okay? We want to get some of our yellow going here. We want to make sure the palette is clean. Okay, so our palette is clean now, and I'm going to put down some yellow, some fresh yellow, because we're going to need a lot of that. Okay, we're also, we have a little bit of red. Let me put a little blue down here. We're going to use the blue a little later, but we're going to get it down there anyway at this point. And okay, so I'm going to distribute some of the color. So I have to be almost drawing with the paint, so to speak. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to wet the page down a little bit, right? We have our brushes, right? So I have my large brush to help us distribute the yellow, the first layer. We have our medium and our small brushes ready to go towards the end of the painting. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to spray down some water. Right, and we do this because the paper is very dry, and you want to have just a little. Our brush was a little dirty. Okay, not a problem. Okay, so again, okay, you want to wet the page so that it is receptive to the pigment, right? When the page is dry, it tends to take a long time for the pigment to get with the paper, right? And also we're working soft initially, right? Soft because we're establishing the first layer of color. Okay, so let's go, right? So I'm picking up some water, some yellow, right? And we're gonna just lay in our first layer of yellow, and we're looking at our reference constantly, right? So, right, certainly light energy coming from left to right. Okay. And I'm distributing the yellow, and I'm sort of keeping the drawing is giving us is the guide, right, to where the color is allocated. So we're always drawing, even with our color. Okay. Keeping it nice and loose. And you can see how the paper is buckling a little bit because of the moisture that it's receiving. Okay. Right, and so it's like definitely denser. The color is denser back in here. Nice and bright there, right? Can push the color around a little bit. It's thinner there because that blue is going to sit on there. We don't want that vase looking green. We want it to be bluish, right? And so now I can introduce a little bit of that very, very fine red that we're seeing on the skull. Okay, very good. Okay, so now at this point we're going to take a look. Am I good with this at this point? Yes, right? So the idea is that we're going to be laying down our blue to create that green, right, on top of our yellow, right? So, okay, just want to make sure I have enough color here, enough chroma. Okay, very good, right? So I'm happy with that at this point. So I'm going to dry the painting a little bit. Slightly drier. What we're going to do is we're going to clean up our yellow. We always want to keep our colors moving and under control. Okay, so we've pushed back the yellow a little bit. Okay, and we're going to start identifying some of the other colors, right? So I think I'm going to work with my red right now. So you see this, there's a hue and there's a little pink behind the vase area there, right? So the one thing we want to do is we want to keep our water clean, okay? And I'm going to move to a medium brush. I'm going to put down a layer of pink on my vase because it has a and one of the things we want to do is we want to wet the area of the vase a little bit with just some straight up water, right? Create that the bleeding effect of the color, the beautiful watercolor, right? We want to keep it soft, right? So, okay, we want to just a little bit. Okay, right. So, especially right there where that flower is. I'm looking at my reference here, right? And you'll see when we put that blue over the top of the vase, it's going to do exactly what we want. The vase has sort of like a purplish hue to it, right? So it's that blue and the red that's going to make that purple, right? So there's our vase, and I'm going to put in the red color nice and strong on our apple. Okay, first layer, strong but thin, transparent, right? And then on the skull, it's a little bit of warmth and redness to it, just in the light side. Might have overdone it here a little bit, but that's okay. Right, and also the liquid in the wine glass, right? It's going to be a much deeper red, but we're going to start with that. And the shape of the wine is going right into the glass there. Okay, right? We have some of these stems up here. Sort of have a reddish nature to it, right? We can even splash some reds into this area. Okay. All right, see how we're working and distributing the color where we see it, right? Remember that our reference it's a point of departure, right? This is a point of departure. Our commitment is to our painting, right? So we do everything to bring it to life for the sake of the painting, right? This is just a reference, okay? So let's go. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the background, and we're going to start locating our blue, right? To create that, I'm going to just, for the sake of interest, I'm going to put a little bit of red right along there, along the bottle. All right. Okay. A little bit of red here. Just like oranges and stuff, orange colors. Okay, very good. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on the background. So we're going to isolate all these objects, right? So we're going to clean up our palette again, and we're going to switch to the blue. Okay. We're going to move on to the blue, onto the background. We want to be working very wet initially, right? So lots of water, because we want this first layer of blue to be soft. It's on the it's the background, the cloth. The cloth is soft, right? So I'm going to go around and I'm going to isolate the objects, meaning I'm going to be working in the background, right? And I'm going to, right? And I'm trying to imitate the feel of the cloth. Oh, see how nice and soft that is back there. I love it. Beautiful. Happy with that. A little bit more value here, right? And we can cover up some of that bottle at this point. Right, it's in the shadow area. Right, and we're going to make sure that we don't obliterate that highlight. There's a little highlight in there, but it still falls within those values, okay? So we're gonna continue here, right? So I'm working with my blue, nice and thin. Okay, so I'm gonna continue it right around the. See how when you put down the color, the blue color initially, it looks very blue, and then when it dries back and connects with the existing color, it assimilates, it kind of converges into the secondary color, the green, right, as it dries. Okay, and you don't want to torture it. You just want to put the color down and let it do its thing. Okay, now I have to look at that area right in there in between these objects. Nice. Right, so we're working light, very light right now. Right, we're going to work from light to dark. And the stem to the wine glass is transparent at this point. Right, so we're giving it a very delicate layer of color. Now here's where the leaves kind of define themselves. It's the front edge of the light. All this up in here, so we got to work in between the okay, and we can start working into the shadow area. Let's hit the skull here, for example. Okay, so we have this sort of grayish blue value, right? It's like, almost like a purple, so I'm going to mix up some blue with some red, right? And I'm going to identify some of my second values here. Everything that's in the shadow area, right? I'm looking at that whole area back there where the shadow area is. It's a little red and some blue. Gives me my violet gray. And I'm respecting those highlights. Red and blue. Red, blue. Gives me that violet gray. And it's the first layer, so it's soft. Yeah, and as I'm doing this, I'm seeing some of these chromatic bright areas. See that orange, that yellow in there? So we're going to touch all those colors in there eventually. Okay, so, and I want to see how that edge is soft there, so I want to make sure it's soft. And see, as I'm working with the wet value, it's kind of bleeds together, nice and soft. That's what you want. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for now. Right, and as I'm doing that, I'm working with that shadow value, so I'm going to take some blue, right, and some red, and some blue, predominantly blue. Got too much red in there. Okay, so the blue. Right, the blue. Okay, and I'm going to establish with this deep value, I want to make sure this bottle is going to exist, and I have to put it in delicately and keep that. There's that one shadow area, I'm sorry, highlight area, very bright highlight area. Okay, down the middle. You can see it right there. So I got my medium brush for I can get some of the detail that I need. Right, and I'm working kind of dry here because I want it to be sharp. Kind of shadow disappears there and then reappears, or the highlight, I keep saying shadow, the highlight reappears about there. Okay. Right, now we can clean up our palette again. I want to put in some of that blue on the vase. Okay. So I'm going to clean up this purplish color. Okay. I want to get back to my pure blue and maybe some of my other pure colors. Right. So let's go. So I got eliminated that purple. Okay, or violet. Okay. And let's pick up some of that blue again. Okay, so at this point, right, I can see where I'm just going to go to the outside of the vase here for a minute and get the shape properly done. Okay. And while I'm at it, I can begin to carry that shadow area there, right? Okay, so now let's take a very, very, very thin layer of blue, right? And I'm gonna just lay it over the top. And I'm looking at there's some pattern, decorative qualities to that vase that I don't want to obliterate. So I'm like kind of working around it, the first layer. All right. And see how as I'm laying that blue over the pink, it's creating that desired violet. I'm going to go around that little rosette. There's some reflections there and so forth. Nice and thin initially. You can see there's some greens there that are appearing because of that yellow that's peeking through. Right, and you can see the reflection of the skull on the vase. Actually, there's a pinkish color. Right, this is all deepening properly. Oops. Make sure I include that detail there. And see how I'm just laying in the first layer of just very, very, very thin. Very thin, but it's going a long way to establishing it's still wet. Okay. I'm going to maybe take a couple of my darker values, work them in. There's all these like sort of watercolory nuances, like leaves in there. There's a little spot there in the middle of that. Still a little too wet, but this is good. It's making it soft. All right, there's some details there. Whoa. Paintbrush is falling apart. A little denser blue is required here, right? Right along in here. Perfect time to do that. Look at that. I'm just touching the color into there and it's bleeding together beautifully. That's what you want, that watercolor to take over right? You're just trying to control it. This is in the shadow area, so it's all going to be fairly dark back in here. Beautiful. Right? I'm gonna touch in some green in there. Like a bluish green. Ever so slight. Right? There are these leaves there that, okay, so, ooh, that's a little strong, right? But that's okay. Just push it around. Pick it up and push it around. That's going to all bleed together. Nice. It's back in here. Okay. Nice. And as I have that green going here, I'm going to let my eye travel a little bit, and I'm going to look in here, and I'm going to put some of that color in there, and I'm looking at it as a shape. It's fairly dark right in here. Right, and here are the stems that are sporting those flowers there. All right, trying to stay bright. Just touching in some of the green where I see it. Let your eye travel to the color. Sharp in the light. It's kind of like the leaves. Looks like a little tannish color underneath here. Let's put a little bit of red in there. Okay, this is the shadow side. And you can always dab it up. Okay, so I'm liking this, okay? So it's nice and bright still, okay? Nice and loose, okay? Now let's see if we can establish that apple, okay? I'm going to clean up the palette a little bit. My water's still fresh, right? I'm going to go in and put my second layer of color on my apple, and I'm seeing a little bit of a orange energy there at the top of the apple, so I'm going to put in my red, but it's got some yellow in it, which is a good thing. Yellow always cranks up the energy of the color, right? So I'm putting a little yellow into my red, creating this orangey red, right? Which is good. Very chromatic, bright. Okay. And this is all going to be shadow. Okay. So that's sort of the underlying color of the apple, right? Nice and bright. Okay. And what I'm concerned about is that that top is going to be able to have enough energy to it to withstand the shadow area. And I think I'm in a perfect space there. Now, we've got the wine thing there. So let's first draw in the glass part. Now, this is where a little bit of artistic experience comes in, where I want to just take a fairly neutral, sort of like a blue, right? And I'm just going to kind of draw in the areas so I can follow. So I see there's a little edge there, right? Certainly a highlight there too, right? So don't want to miss that. And then there's an edge on the back side. Okay. I'm just smudging it a little to give it that characteristic, and a little bit of a couple little shadow areas like that, right? Okay, and then I'm going to come down along here and see these characteristics here. Draw them in nice and light at first, right? I'm going all the way down to the stem. I can still see my drawing here, right? I'm going to draw in my stem, the glass stand there. Okay, just so I know where it is. It's my little shadow area, and the shadow area is going to continue out that way, right? So we've established that. Very important, right? And there's this side of the stem. And some of these details are going to get darker, right? Let's look now. Get some blue going here. Very light. And I'm going to put it in there. And we're seeing through the glass, so it should take on that green hue, so that so it seems transparent, so it should be of the same hue as the background itself, right? Now you can see it's kind of falling into the page, showing that transparent aspect. And I'm going to, because my background is going to deepen, so I'm just going to deepen this while we're at it. Right, and so there's the glass, nicely established. Now we want to, let's go in and define the liquid that's in the glass a little better. So I'm going to go right for, it's kind of a burgundy color, right? So predominantly blue and red. Blue and red with a little yellow to give it that burgundy color. Okay, and so I'm gonna put the surface in there. Oops, and I have to respect those highlights. I should be using the sharp brush. Okay, looking at the shapes, and it's gonna go 1 or 2 steps darker, so I am Just working nice and light at first. But you can see how already we're getting into some of the detail work right away by using a small sharp brush, okay, where needed. Okay, now we can go in and while we're at it, let's do so. The complementary color to the red is the green, right? To make a dark red for that shadow area, and it's got a lot of blue in it too. So we're going to make a green. So the green requires a little red, okay, to make a dark red. So I got my red going, and then so the green is the blue, right? And you add a little yellow in there, that creates that green, the blue and yellow, okay? So here we have a dark red, a darker red, less chromatic, right, for our first layer. So we can just add in a little bit there. I'm gonna push that around a little bit later. And nice, it's coming across as a little purplish, which is really good. Okay. All right, now I want to soften that edge. Perfect. For now, okay? You can see how strong that is. Okay. Now we want to, again, clean up we've been going back and cleaning up our palette constantly, right? The painting is bright. We're working from light to dark, right? And so now I'm going to go back and reestablish some of the shadow configurations and placements, right? To force the light into the painting. And once we see the light more in the painting, it's going to be the next step towards seeing where the finish is going, right? So again, here we go. So I'm going to be working in the background surrounding the objects, right? So I'm going to be putting down some more of that bluish green, right? The surrounding value out there, right? So here we go, right? And deepening our values as we do it, right? So here's my blue, and I'm going to deepen the value. Okay. Let me get those brushes out of the water. That's what happens when you leave your brushes in the water. The casing, the finish starts to come off eventually. I love taking care of my brushes because I usually get decent brushes and they are very much appreciated. So I want to make sure I don't spill anything here. Okay, and I'm going to touch in a little bit of that yellow into my blue. All right. Too much yellow, but okay, it's okay. We could stretch it. So now you can see how that blue is looking greenish. Well, let's bring it out of the green, back to the blue. Okay, back to the blue. Okay, with a little yellow in it. Okay, now, there we go. Again, working nice and light. Okay, so I'm working in the shadow areas, right? So I'm gonna go back in here. Working soft. And there's that big fold back in here, right? Oh boy. Work around the color. And this is the first layer, right? So I'm just keeping that line sharp for now, but it's going to fall away. I'm gonna make it softer. incorporate that bottle into our shadow. So you see how I'm giving the bottle a layer of this green too. It's falling away into the shadow area. It's really a blue that's working. Blue is a cool color, right? Blue falls away. Okay. And you have to always struggle to make sure we have enough color as we're putting it down. Never enough color. Okay. That's all in the shadow area. Right, we're going to probably be going a couple more values down from this, so meaning darker, so I'm just going to really work it along that whole shadow area. That's the graphic statement of the painting, is that shadow area that supports the light. So it's very important that we give it a lot of attention, a lot of presence, the shadow area. And see how I'm layering the colors to achieve my end game color. Nice, starting to appear. Beautiful. Oh, too much yellow. Oh, okay, so I mean, that's okay. We got to get that blue going anyway. So there we go. All right. I gotta get that. All right, so that whole, lots of water. Go in there and soften this right now. Okay. Should be using a larger brush here. Yeah. Knowing what tools to use when is part of the game also, right? So that was a good move, much quicker. All right. And as that area is still wet, I'm going to play in some of the soft shadow. I'm going to work it all the way down here. There's a lot of room to cover, but see how quickly I'm doing it? Large brush, working soft. Thin. Ooh, again, my yellow gets out of control. It's incredible how powerful some of these colors are, right? So it's okay, I'll need it. So I'm just pushing some more blue into it. Okay. This whole area is kind of nice and bright, but still value in there. Put a lot of water in there to make it smooth. Work it together. Let the color and the pigment flow with the water. All right. Nice. Okay. Okay, so while it's wet, you know, actually I want to just bring this down one more shot here. And you can see how the painting is nice and light at this point. Beautiful, bright light. And as we deepen the values, we're going to force the light into the picture. And we're going to be working light to dark. So, all right, we're sticking to our strategy. All right, like it, right? So now I can, again, while that whole shadow area is still a little wet, I'm going to deepen it once again, right? And I'm gonna run some of that yellow into my blue, but I'm gonna try to keep it as blue as possible on the blue side, right? Now, right, and that cast shadow, that modeled cast shadow of flowers. A little bulge in the shadow is definitely the edge of the vase. Real dark back here. With every deepening of every layer that's deepening, right, the light starts showing up more and more. And you can see how the cool colors play the role of shadow. Cool being blue at this point. Bluish green. Okay, now I'm going to touch in my sharp shadow areas here. And I'm going to touch it right around my apple here. All right. My first layer is soft. Right, that's forcing the light into the picture, right? You can see it. And then my shadow area for my wine glass, right? And I should handle it as softly as possible first round. And it's the shape of the wine glass. Laid out. That's it for a first shot. Pretty good, right? Okay, so now I can take some of that, use it as a shadow enhancer here. Okay, you can really see the light coming in now. Let's give it some of that shadow work on the apple. Okay. Wow, the light's really coming in there now. Okay. And so now we're going to go work on our shadow on our skull. I think I'm going to add a little bit of chromatic dimension to the skull here. I see some oranges and reds in here. So I'm going to just quickly mix up a little orange. Closer to the light, it's hotter, so I'm going to put it right in there. I'm going to put it right where I see it, right there. I see it kind of along there, where the light transition is. All right. Little here and there. Oops, too much. Oops. Oops, oops, oops. No big deal. All right. Maybe a little under there. Okay, I'm liking that. Okay. Very good. Okay, now I'm going to give it another shot, shadow area over that. And I want to make sure it's not too green. I want to keep it in that purple, so I have to clean up my palette a little bit. Notice again, I'm cleaning up the palette. Okay, don't want to get the colors all muddy. So I'm going for like a little bit of a violet mix for the shadow area of the skull. Okay, there we go. Comes off like a gray right there. Right, so I'm gonna deepen it. Nice. Blue and a little red makes for that indigo-ish, purplish color, which is great for shadow areas. Oh, I forgot to touch in some of that orange over here into the depths of that right in there. Okay. All right, so here we go with the purplish gray. And this should be soft along there. So we're structuring the color, you can see it. And it's deep, deep over here. Okay, and here's where some of the detail starts coming in. This is still all in the shadow area. That's all right. A little pure bluish there. All right. Love it. All right. Now I'm going to get in there and exaggerate it a little bit. It's almost like a pinkish, bright shadow area in there. Right, and so we're going to be adding some detail later on, but so now begin to add some of the shadow work. Okay. Right? We can just enhance that shadow a little bit in the background. See, now I'm kind of jumping in and out of the color scheme because we're working towards finishing this thing more into the detail, right? So shadow's nice and dark here, right underneath the skull. Okay. All right. While this is still wet, you want this to fall away. Increase my value where it belongs. Now we can go back and kind of deepen values once again. So I'm going to go back to my bottle